Welcome back to Highlander Heart, and as you can see, this time we are traveling to an animated universe where we will discover another MacLeod, another Ramirez, and another sword. Yes, it still works. Yes. Sorry. Yes, we are going to be talking about the animated series because, of course, we have to talk about the animated series. It's one of those things, a little bit like the other things that we've talked about, where it's spoken of in maybe not such a nice way sometimes. But, you know, I think they're a bit wrong. But we'll discover a little bit more about that later, I guess.
Not wrong, but not right.
Well, yeah, you know, I think there are always good parts of things, as much as there are bad, and that's what we like to do in this kind of. You know, we're not going to, you know, we're gonna sort of unwrap it all and look into it. So, as ever. With this, we have been very fortunate in our unraveling of the animated series to have been given a couple of pieces by Kareem Michael Damashki at Davis Panzer to help with the background of the animated series, or should I say, as it was originally envisaged, young Highlander. Apparently, I can see why they changed that.
Yes.
But I guess it kind of speaks of where they wanted to go with that. So Kareem gave us some great stuff. And later on this episode, we have got some guest. So yeah, so we have some we've got some great stuff coming up for you a little bit later too. So look, why don't we just dive in with the first thing that Kareem gave us, which was a wonderful document, which was a series Bible, which almost was, there's almost sort of a question and answer seems to be going on through this.
Yeah.
But I'll let Joe get into that and tell us all about it.
Yeah, this version of the Bible is kind of a curious document because at the beginning is essentially kind of, I guess, studio notes, followed by the actual Bible, and all of this is from June of '93, so it's fairly early on in the production. And one of the biggest evidences of that is that Cortan is not called Cortan. Ramirez is not called Ramirez. They have different names. Both S names, which are, I don't know where they got these names from. Cortan was originally called Shamhantha. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And then the Ramirez character was Sahagan, Sahagan, I don't know, Sahagan, but maybe because they realized they might be difficult to pronounce, they opted for different names. But yeah, I'm kind of curious as to what point they decided to work Ramirez in. But the Bible is it's a very dense, and I mean dense as in full of a lot of things, document. I think, well, there's a lot of actually cool takeaways I take from this. First of all, they put a great deal of thought into the fact that, first and foremost, this being animated and being in the 90s, that it was likely to be marketed or aired at a time where kids could watch. It was like definitely before the age of, you know, adult animation. I mean, anime from Japan was very adult, and that was understood. But this is American, for lack of a better term, you know, animation. So that was cartoons. That was stuff for Saturday mornings or afternoons after school and things like that. And the producers note in the Bible the fact that they need to be cognizant of that fact, even though they're kind of intending it for fans of Highlander. That kind of awareness and some other kind of deep dive details in this definitely indicate that this wasn't just a money grab. This wasn't like, oh, hey, listen, let's do a cartoon and make some more money. They actually were looking at this as being a long-term, really in-depth expansion of the Highlander universe. I mean, they even talk about, you know, at one point that you know, in order to tie it to the movies and all that, they expected that you know, in the final battle, which they said, you know, episode 52, which really thinking ahead, you know, that Quentin would call upon Connor MacLeod, much like Connor did in Highlander 2 for Ramirez, and he would show up to, you know, impart that last bit of wisdom and give him that last bit of, you know, they called it life force, not quickening, but last bit of energy to go on and defeat Cortan. So that, I thought that was a nice touch. But yeah, they really not only tied it into and spoke about the movies, but the series a little bit. I mean, they even, you know, postulated that maybe, you know, Cortan's, you know, enforcers could have been, you know, an evolution of the Hunters from the TV series, and that maybe the Immortals, if you know, they didn't want to go that direction, that maybe the Watchers were the ones that were overseeing everything, so they, you know, extrapolated what could happen to those two groups, you know, in the future. They even another curious part, they even speculated and said, well, maybe you know, Quentin could be from Zeist. You know,
Yeah.
maybe he was sent from Zeist, and that's why, you know, even though there haven't been immortals in centuries, there's a new immortal. They even speculated at some point, if we wanted to really be creative and not have to be tied down to, you know, Earth fauna and all that, we could actually have this series take place on Zeist and actually open it up to other planets, make Zeist some kind of like twin planet to Earth, open it up to where we could have adventures on other planets and stuff like that. So they really were cognizant of the franchise as a whole, and I kind of like that. I could gush about this thing all day. I mean, there's even parts of it that I thought would have been very interesting to explore in the series. Just the fact that they, you know, again, they were like, this is a cartoon and we have to be aware of the violence. And obviously there's a challenge with a franchise that has people beheading each other. How do we depict that? And how do we depict quickenings? Again, life force, what they called it in the Bible. But how do we depict all this and be true to the original, yet, you know, make it palatable to a family audience? And one of the more interesting things they came up with that actually ended up in the series is that immortals could choose to transfer their quickening, for lack of a better term, and their power to another immortal by holding onto their swords, and they could transfer it, and that immortal would then become mortal. And my first thought was, man, if that had been built into the show, to the live action series, that would have opened up story possibilities immeasurably. I mean, can you imagine, you know, Duncan, you know, Fitzcairn, you know, at some point, you know, saying, you know, I'm tired of all this. I want to be mortal. I want to give you, you know, and both men struggling with that. And Duncan's like, you know, how can I take this and make my friend mortal? I even thought of, you know, what if Joe Dawson, the reason why he was a Watcher is he was immortal, and at some point gave up his immortality, only then to be drafted to Vietnam and lose his legs and decide that he's going to be a Watcher and observe immortals going forward. And he was an old, you know, immortal friend for centuries of mythos. I mean, there was, sorry, you know, fanfic here, but
Yeah.
to me, it was like, man, that would just open up so many possibilities.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, just the stuff they put in there to kind of expand the canon and the continuity of Highlander, I thought was brilliant. I mean, they kind of settled on the fact that they needed to set it in the future, because they could be more creative with the animation, and also it's a lot easier to probably animate fantastical landscapes as opposed to, you know, alleyways in New York City. And things like that. So, you know, originally it was a meteor strike hit the Earth, and 1,000 years later, all this was going on. But yeah, no, and I like the other kind of concept of the fact that immortals could choose to still stay immortal but not participate in the game, that they threw down their swords and refused to take up arms, and that, you know, one of the main premises of this was a group of them chose to do that so that there wouldn't be a last immortal and risk someone like a Kurgan or something like that being the last and getting the prize. And that was, you know, that obviously was carried over into the series as well, and that kind of, I thought, brought an interesting facet to Cortan. Here's this guy that ruled over and, you know, just decided, I'm the last immortal, so I'm going to rule over. And he really wasn't, you know, there was this constant reminder that he wasn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this document is just rich with world building. I'm disappointed that a lot of it didn't carry over into the end product, or that it wasn't expanded upon, you know, in the, you know, live action series or future movies, because it was just some great stuff. I mean, the whole thing of being able to transfer the quickening via the sword, and a lot of emphasis they put on individual swords for immortals in the Bible. I'm like, the show would have only benefited from that because it gave more weight, if you would, to why immortals fight with swords, and also why they all seem to, for the most part, have the same sword, if not the same type of sword, throughout their immortality. And I was like, and then that would also explain why they could just pull the sword out of their coat when it wasn't there before. I mean, it was like, this is like explaining these things, giving more of a, you know, mysticism and everything, especially if they came from the dawn of time. That would make sense that there would be mysticism and magic and like that rolled into it. And they really kind of play that up in the Bible too. They're like, you know, not only does the 1,000 years in the future in a desolate wasteland give them the opportunity to do fantastic animation, but it also, you know, it's sort of a reset for humanity, that, you know, the Dark Ages are again. Then, well, that explains why there's not high technology. There isn't like a phaser where you can just blow an immortal's head off and be done with it. You know, it's like, no, they have to fight with, you know, swords. And on top of that, in Cortan's obsession to be the last, he outlaws, you know, bladed weapons and hoards metal so nobody else can forge a weapon or forge a sword. And it's just like, you know, all this stuff. I'm like, this would have made a really great live action series, much less an animated show. And so if all this could have been brought into it, I think it would have just been, I think it would have gone 52 episodes. I think it would have just been a brilliant, brilliant show. So I'll stop babbling now. I'm just really gushing about this thing because I was reading this just going, this is amazing. If I had heard this description as a show, I would be on board. And I think all Highlander fans would have been really excited by this.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So, well, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but I didn't read the whole Bible, but I did sort of glance. And the thought they put into it, even though it didn't show up in the final product, like you said, it means they were trying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that makes up for a lot of things.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they had very good intentions for this. They really wanted it to be a high caliber product, but also to make sense within the Highlander. It was like, if you're going to do something that takes place 1,000 years in the future, how would you do it and keep it within continuity of, at that time, it was only the 2 movies and just the beginning, first couple seasons of the series, but how would you keep that in the continuity? And I mean, I even like the fact that they're like, you know, if we want to go this direction, we can include Zeist. And to me, I was like, you know, I'd have been all right with that. That might have been, you know, the redemption of Zeist in a way. You know, it's like, give it a purpose, give it a meaning. Because they even point out, they're like, you know, at the end of, you know, Highlander 2, Connor's going back to Zeist. So what if this whole, you know, this whole thing, he's the last one on Earth, but what if going back to Zeist kicks off the whole thing, kicks off the gathering again, and you have this whole, you could tell the story there. I'm like, I'd be okay with that. So Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I applaud them, and I wish I knew who wrote this, because I would like to really give them kudos and thank them for their thought behind it. So yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and it's a fascinating read, and I think one of the interesting things about trying to do this and trying to do this animated series and incorporate the things that they wanted to incorporate, like the familiar things like Ramirez and Connor in a very small way, is how it fits into the franchise as a whole.
Yeah.
But of course, the trouble is it doesn't, and it can't.
No.
And you could speculate all day how this could fit into, I think in early 90s at that point, Connor was still alive technically within, the franchise. That's conceivable. But then, Ramirez, how, how does he fit in?
Like I said, in the Bible, it isn't Ramirez.
No, sure.
He's a different character, and that would have worked. However, speaking of Ramirez, a lot of everything actually that they extrapolate upon and created for the life force / quickening all comes from the beginning from the first Highlander movie, when Ramirez is explaining to Connor what the quickening is, that it's a life force, that it lets you feel life around you, the animals, the trees, and all this kind of stuff. And that, I mean, it was hinted about in that movie that you could use it in other ways, and that it was transferable. So they kind of extrapolated upon that. Yeah. And then they kind of like went with, in the Bible, there's no Clyde and little animal to follow around with. That's added later, but they talk about maybe he has a sister back at home base that he sneaks off to talk to and get advice from. But it was very much setting up to be the lone warrior. And they even reference Ramirez telling Connor that men will hate you. You'll be feared because of what you are. And they really, so to me, taking kind of the core stuff, the first movie that was never followed up on, and that would just seem to be throwaway lines, and actually making something of that, it's kind of like this almost ties in better to the core Highlander mythos than anything else, including the series that came after. I mean, so
no, and that's amazing. So of course, saying that, about Ramirez and not sort of being able to figure out how, he's kind of almost a fly in the ointment in terms of linking this to anything else in the franchise. Especially since he's not the Ramirez. He's a different one. He's Don Vincente Ramirez, possibly for copyright reasons.
Hang on,
but it
full
wasn't.
Name, please. Do his full name.
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't apparently always the case, and that's where this next bit comes in. So Rob, do you want to explain what we found out?
Well, we found, I mean, let's stop for a second and take a little bit step back. Highlander, after all these years, is still surprising us.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We've been talking about these things for many years, running around in circles, trying to fit things into where the square peg into the round hole all the time, thinking, and then we're like, these guys didn't know what they were doing. They weren't talking about it. They weren't thinking about it very much. We all did. And behind the scenes, they're thinking more than we are.
Yeah.
And there's all this stuff we didn't know about. And they just let us rabbit on, have our arguments, all these sort of things. And it's just like, now every time like we're doing these videos, we're learning new stuff after all these years.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. To which brings us to the Highlander animated movie script. And when Grant sent this to me, I rightly assumed that it was just a transcript of the edited version of the series into the movie. that was released on video and DVD.
Yeah.
And nothing more. And you think, oh, well, that's good. Let's see what happens. Let's see if anything changed.
Yeah.
And straight from the outset, it's completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're thinking, what? Okay, there's new information. I'll take this in. And you read the script. It feels, when I was reading the script, this first scenes, it feels like it follows on from the animated series.
Yeah.
But it's not. And it's becomes apparent when you read through the script, because at the start of the script, there's talk of the Highlander beating the Cortan, and there's all these people waiting for like a messiah figure, to come ashore, kind of Bonnie Prince Charlie like in the Highlands and all these sort of things. That's what I'm thinking about. And they're like, he's coming to save us, he's coming to save us, and then this child walks onto the dock. They're like, him? No, what are you trying to do? No. And they put him through a test. There's an immortal waiting to give him his knowledge, and they put him through a test to see if he's worthy, and that was done throughout the series. So he passes this test, goes on. There's a plot afoot. Cortan is sent a mercenary to kidnap another immortal called Ran, a Japanese samurai, a master of war. And during the flashbacks of this, we realised that Ran, the person that's been kidnapped, knew Ramirez back in the day, and he didn't know Don Vincente Marino Ramirez. He knew Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez.
Yeah.
And you're flashing back to 16th century Japan, where Ramirez meets Shikiko, Japanese princess, who we all know Ramirez married.
Yeah.
And the father made him his sword. And it ties very much into that first movie.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It changed the. I mean, you're reading this and you're seeing Ramirez and Clyde and Quentin, and you're seeing the animated stuff here, but they threw in the movie. So it's hard to place any of this.
Yeah.
But the script read very much like a Highlander movie. There's a plot. The bad guy has a plot. He has planned this Machiavellian thing. He's planning to brainwash Ran because he knew Ramirez back in the day. Ran doesn't like Ramirez because they both loved Shikiko. So there's the love triangle part there. And he basically wants Ran to give his knowledge to Quentin, but also his hatred for Ramirez in order to kill Ramirez. Like Cortan's sitting there, twiddling his thumbs, watching his little plan play out. He's not like brute forcing his way through everything. He's set these things in play just so he can sit and watch friends tear themselves apart, which I thought was incredibly evil, more evil than anything they did in the show.
Yeah.
Which I thought was brilliant. But yeah, I mean, as it goes, you find out Cortan's got a master plan. People turn, like the mercenary Shade eventually falls in love with Quentin. And this is where it becomes more like the movies, because they have a moment when they're being honest and telling each other what's going on, that they fall in love, and then the coat comes off and you cut to another scene, but you know exactly, like every time a MacLeod meets somebody after 5 minutes, they're going to have sex. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I tell you my name, that happens. And then they go basically try and fix the plan. Like the Rand goes to kill Quentin, he takes the power, he transfers his power, and Quentin goes mad with hate to kill Ramirez. And it's Ramirez and Quentin's fight's really long. Like, it's brutal. It doesn't feel like an animated cartoon. It feels like if you'd been watching this, you'd be as tired as the person doing the animation, How long does this fight go on? But yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed the script and the fact that it was tying into the original movie.
Yeah.
Far more than anything else has.
Mm.
With Ramirez, you're finding out all these things that we just were told about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, I generally love that. But the script itself, it feels like there was going to be another one, because there's when Quentin confronts Cortan near the end, it doesn't end. There's no beheading, there's no transfer of power or anything. It's kind of like the parallel towards Star Wars, you know. Darth Vader's in the TIE fighter and he's spun off.
Yeah.
Good guys win and they celebrate, yay. But he's out there somewhere.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, yeah, like I said, after all these years, still being surprised by Highlander is it's incredible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a real shock to find that, and you know, like we said, we don't know where that fits in the jigsaw puzzle of. I mean, you can only presume that it predates the series. That said, when you watch the series, there are certainly elements of characters and places and themes and things that were in there. There are two prominent sort of, I guess, Japanese characters in the animated series. There is a character which essentially comes across as being Ran, or you know, is very similar, and in fact, both of them in a way, the one is the sort of master of war, but the other sort of prominent character seems to be more of the one that's kind of the sort of friends with Ramirez and things, and sort of harks back to their time. There's a nice little flashback with Ramirez and Cortan, and you know, how they used to kind of, you know, have a bit of a kind of issue with each other and things like that. And then certainly in terms of the DVD set that I have, the 4-disc set, the penultimate episode is very similar to the end of the movie, in that Cortan is effectively kind of defeated, but by falling down a crevasse. Although at the end you do see that he does survive. But yeah, I love the idea that, and I'll get in trouble for this, but I see similarities between this and Avatar: The Last Airbender. So, and I said that to my son, and he's just like, "No, how is it? No, it isn't. No, it's nothing like that." But yeah, but there are elements, especially in the fact that Aang, he doesn't. He is aware of the history of his kind, and that they you know, he has to kill the Fire Lord, but he doesn't want to. He wants to move past that. He wants to, and it's very similar for Quentin. He gets to that. He knows that he has to defeat Cortan, but within the movie and towards the end of the animated movie, he has no intention of actually killing him, and he doesn't want to do that. You know, he's, you know, Cortan's hanging from the cliff, and he's like, "Well, you'll never get my knowledge," and Quentin's like, "I don't want your knowledge," and then poof, boots him off, and he hands Gruber's down, you know, down the crevasse, and that's that. So I like, yeah, no, I really like that. I thought it was very interesting, and I kind of feel like they used elements from that to kind of propagate through the series. At least it felt like that.
Watch it. I just watched all the episodes again, and like I said, it surprised me because there was things in it that I didn't remember. Like I must have missed a lot of episodes.
Yeah, same.
Because when Joe's talking about the Bible and how they were doing the whole transfer of knowledge thing, something really interesting popped up in one of the episodes. And it's an immortal who hadn't taken the oath.
Yeah.
But wanted to give Quentin his power. So he tried to fight him to make him take his head.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't transfer the power simply because he hadn't taken the oath.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, you have to take the oath, and then you can do the magic thing.
Yeah.
The magic hand thing. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, what we got wasn't great, but now we've looked back the Bible and the scripts and what they tried to get done, and
Yeah.
you see it being watered down completely. I mean, there's still a lot of good you
There
can
is.
enjoy from
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was the issue. I think the issue is the watering down. The issue is as often you do tend to see, even now with TV, when you look thinking of Netflix and how the kind of the short series is starting to overtake the 22, 24 episodes a year series, because
Yeah.
you can really hone that story and make every episode the best it can be, and not have to feel like you have to stretch it out. And I think
Right.
that's part of the issue here.
Yeah.
No flip shows.
Yeah, exactly. They've got these great themes and these great ideas. There was a lot of mature kind of concepts and ideas going on in this. I think in a lot of ways it was ahead of its time, but it was stretched out beyond its limits, to the point where the most frustrating thing for me is when Cortan would say, "I've waited a long time for this MacLeod," and I'm thinking, you saw him like 2 episodes ago. It has not been that long, because
Yeah.
almost every other week he was back in Magonda. It's too soon to fight him. Well, yes, you said that
Yeah.
last time, and yeah, here he is again. So much repetition, because almost like they felt like there wasn't enough drama. There's not enough drama in this episode. Well, we need to fight against Cortan again. Oh, okay. And so that repetition and that fact that it just it was just a little too stretched out, and a little that they would trying to fill it with things that didn't.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because that and a lot of the usual tropes that this type of series engender and that happen are specifically talked about in the Bible, about we should really avoid these kind of tropes. Even like the concept of Clyde, the plucky young sister or brother, and the animal and stuff. They were like, we should avoid these things. We should figure out a different way to do these. And even some of the explanations of story elements they wanted, they're like, here's the way we should do it to avoid this. And those things ended up in the final product. And it's like, well, I guess maybe that's, which surprises me, because obviously that must have come from the producers or maybe a different production team, because the notes at the beginning of this Bible are actually, I'm assuming they're from the producers or production company, but they're really smart and astute. And like, we agree with you on this. We should avoid this. We're concerned about this being too stereotypical and stuff like that. And so how did we get from that to what we saw on screen? It's just perplexing. And I mean, we know, but
yeah. I guess, I mean, a lot of it, I would imagine, would be marketing. You must have somebody in marketing kind of going, well, look, okay, so here are the things that kids love in cartoons. For one, you need some sort of thing on them, like the Thundercats emblem, that's going to light up. So if we had toys, they can have something that will light up. So can you do something like that? Okay, well, maybe if all the immortals have this little green gem that lights up when they sense each other. Great, okay, do that, that's brilliant. We need a Schnarf. Any idea, any possibility you could work a Schnarf in there? Yeah, we can work a Schnarf in there. So then you've got this weird rabbit dog thing, and then, it very much feels like those kinds of things. They're like, look, these are the things that kids love. We know we need it for marketing. We need it for, we need to have these things in there.
Well, and the Bible talks about, Quentin as part of it and becoming initiated as an immortal. He needs to essentially, basically, eventually forge his own sword, to find his own sword, but that's a ways off. He'll fight with like an ivory stick before then, and various other weapons that are similar. And then in the first episode of what we got, Ramirez shows up and goes, "Oh, you must have the sword of the Highlander, which is a katana." I'm like, how is that a Highland sword? That's not.
No. Well, and here's the other thing that I hate. Now we all know this. Apart from memes, everybody knows that Highlander is somebody that comes from the Highlands.
Yes.
It evokes the name of where he's from. It's not a title in and of itself,
Right.
but the series very much
Yeah.
treats it like, oh, well, he's the Highlander. You know,
Yes.
like,
You will become the Highlander, not I
Well,
was
yeah.
born there.
yeah,
Isn't
exactly,
that
yeah.
already?
Yeah.
And they do reference the Highlands, but you know, like literally all those dudes are all Highlanders. Like, you know, why is
Well,
nobody scared of them?
well, it's like the Highlands are like a suburb of whatever the big city is. It's like they're not even the Highlands of Scotland, even though everyone kind of had
A Scottish
that
accent. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, pseudo Scottish accent, but they seem to be living in huts. So yeah, it was just like the sword. So yeah, they did make it like it was a title. And it was just assumed that the sword of the Highlander is a, dragon or lion head katana. I'm like, but okay.
Well,
So
and that's the other thing is that this effectively, if you watch the series, what they're saying is that this is Connor's sword.
yes,
Basically, what they're saying,
right.
this is Connor's sword.
Yes. I mean, they went all out with the hot dog motif
Is it?
and the mustard.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
A little bit of guac on there.
like
Yeah.
I'm hungry now that I've seen that.
Tasty, tasty.
No, I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, each of the episodes, especially in the first season, it was like, we're going back to Magonda. You're like, we're not ready. You're like, yeah, no, but there's a plot device we need.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, there's a person we need to find and see,
Yeah.
and you always go in, but they never plug up the hole that they keep climbing through, you know.
No, exactly.
But thankfully, especially during the second season, they moved more away from that, and all the stories, Cortan came to them wherever they were, which helped a lot.
One interesting thing is that they added to the lore of immortals within the Highlander franchise is that apparently you can cure mortals with immortal blood.
Yeah.
Okay.
But was it specifically a cure? Because when I was watching it, they were talking about it being a universal donor blood.
I guess, but
Yeah,
it's the way that it's the way that she specifically spoke about it. I think I guess it made it feel to me like it was kind of your immortal blood can save him effectively. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's just that they're universal donors. But it kind of it felt in a way.
It was nice. I mean, there was one episode where an immortal had cloned himself.
Yeah.
And he wasn't bound by an oath, so he just went mad with a sword, trying to kill people. And he's like, hang on, Ramirez, we can tell these two people apart. I cut one of them on the wrist. Even though he's immortal, he'll still have a scar.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like, that wasn't in the series. She sort of healed.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were trying really hard to give you more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they even wanted in the Bible to expand upon holy ground because, I mean, in the series and the movies, it seems to predominantly be Christian churches that are quote unquote holy ground. And they brought up in the Bible for animated series that should be expanded to, any kind of sacred ground for all religions. And they even said, maybe even areas where, something profoundly not religious, but something profound happened that's now considered sacred ground and holy ground. And I thought that was quite interesting. Again, that didn't I don't remember that being in any of the animated episodes, but again, that would have been great for the series to have brought up, and expanded upon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was never mentioned, holy ground, like safe spaces. We never really had many of them in the animated series.
No.
Fair game.
I mean, there was this thing, the Hill of
Stonehenge or whatever that was supposed to be,
or whatever it's called. Yeah, I don't think they could fight there.
Well, I mean, they couldn't fight there, but there was one episode where Cortan's army tried to knock it all down and kill them all on it while they were there.
Yeah.
There was tanks running into things and knocking things over.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, I mean, maybe Cortan couldn't fight there, but he could send an army to wreak havoc.
Yeah.
They weren't bound by these such things. But yeah, there wasn't, I mean, I think they might just try to stay away from religion, have their own mythology and stuff come up.
Well, look, I mean, we've talked about it for a while, but what we really need is we really need somebody to kind of talk about this and who was actually there at the time.
Yes, and first-hand knowledge.
Yeah, somebody kind of Quentin-y.
Quentin-y? Yes.
Oh, that side.
I mean, we could try a bit. This one's not very talkative. So without further ado, Mick Palace, thank you for joining us so much. It's wonderful to have you here. So for those who don't know, who should know, Mick is one of the, I mean, such a small club. It's such a cool club to be in. He is one of the MacLeods. He is the Highlander. But you know, man, it was a very long time ago.
It was a very long time ago, but I do remember it well.
So look, tell us how it all sort of started for you. How did you come to be Quentin MacLeod?
Well, it was I think it must have been about 15 years old, I guess, and I grew up in Toronto, where I am right now, and I started acting in a couple of different shows. And when I was younger, 12, 13 years old, I was doing some live action stuff around here. And then I had an audition for a cartoon, and I had never done a cartoon series before. Of course, growing up, I loved cartoons, as we all did. And so I was very excited. And I knew it was for the Highlander, and I was familiar with the brand because my father and I had gone to see the movie, and so I was very familiar with the show, although the script made no sense to me from what the movie was. I was like, wait, I don't understand. But nevertheless, I went in. I remember I went down to Nelvana Studios, which is right downtown in Toronto, and I went into this tiny little booth, and I said my name, and I just started pretending that I was some sort of a superhero. And I didn't hear anything of it for a while. I kind of forgot about it, really. And then one day they called me and they said, "Hey, congratulations, you've got the part of Quentin." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. What does this mean? When do we shoot?" And then they're like, no, it doesn't work that way. So we started doing the show in a very small studio downtown Toronto called Studio 306, which was an amazing place. Lots of bands have recorded in there, and it was this very cool room. Still to this day, it's a very cool space with like platinum records on the wall. And we went in there, and we were just in there, a few of us at a time. So it was me and the actress who played my little sister, Clyde, and Ben Campbell, who played Ramirez. And the three of us, because most of our scenes were like the three of us together. And so we would go in every 2 weeks, and we would record a couple, 2 new episodes. And that went on for a couple of years, I guess. It was great. It was a good job.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That sounds amazing. I mean, I can't imagine how it must have been. How old were you when you were recording that?
I think I was 15 or 16. I know that there was a period of time in between where I left the country and I went to go study French in France, and I was living there, and I was 16 at the time, and we were still doing the show. Okay. So I was around that age. Yeah, that's a whole other story that I can tell you. Very cool.
Did you get, so when you went in to do the episodes, did they have like any animations to show you, or are you guys just the three of you reading your lines?
No, we had no animation. It was original voice. I've done those shows where you have you're syncing to the animation, but no, this was totally original voice. At first we didn't really know what the characters looked like. And then we started to see the art, and it was very cool. I thought Quentin's design was awesome. The ponytail was amazing, which at the time was like very cool, I think. And and so I just kind of got to create from scratch, really, in terms of what he was going to be like, and imagine all the scenarios. But the best part about the show, the really cool part was, it was, like I mentioned, it was Ben, and I think her name was Katie was the girl who played Clyde, and me. But they would often bring in, because every episode we would meet a different, immortal.
Yeah.
And then at some point that immortal would pass on their energy to Quentin, right? And so often like a long list of some of Canada's greatest actors from, theater and film and television all came through that door at the time. And I got to meet all of these amazing, I didn't even know they were great at the time, but then subsequently later on, I was like, wow, I worked with that person. Or I'd see somebody, I'd go see a play and they'd be on stage. I'm like, where do I recognize that guy from? Oh yeah, he was one of the immortals on the Highlander. So that was a very cool experience, just getting to kind of do scenes with all of these people who are, what's in Canada, I don't know, it's very different in the US, where you really specialize in just animation or just voices, and you don't do a lot of on-screen stuff.
Right.
But in Canada, almost all of the voice actors also do a lot of screen work and a lot of theater work too, right? So it's one of the reasons why our voice acting community is pretty strong. It's because a lot of them come up through theater. And so getting to meet all of those people was great.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. So you mentioned Ben there. When was the last time have you spoken to him sort of recently? Is it?
I haven't at all. But Ben went through a pretty.
Oh, who's this?
My God. That's amazing. Nice surprise.
Yeah, we're surprised as well because we didn't.
That's amazing. I was just about to tell the story about how Ben, and I haven't seen Ben in 30-something years. But, Ben had to redo all of his lines because he sounded. Do you remember this? You must.
I do, yeah.
To come back and redo everything because he sounded too much like Sean Connery.
Really?
Yeah, they wanted a Scottish accent and all that sort of stuff. And
Well, I was
So
going to ask, why didn't Quentin do a Scottish accent? Being from the Highlands.
no idea.
A, I couldn't, and B, I don't know, it just never came up. I guess, not doing the accent from where your character's from is a great Highlander tradition.
Yes.
It's definitely never a Scottish accent of any kind.
No, there's no Scottish accent. And hiring someone from France to play the Scot, and then a Scot to play a Spaniard.
Yeah.
And then 2 Canadians to play. I mean,
I actually had to re-audition for it. That was the drag. Yeah, they said, "Can you do the same thing you're doing, but with a Canadian accent? But we want you to sound sort of like Sean Connery with a Canadian accent." Okay, I'll try.
Ben, it's crazy to hear your voice again because it just brings me right back hearing it.
Yeah, it's great to see you, man.
Yeah, wow. What a great surprise, guys. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I was so pleased when I reached out to Ben's people and they said that you'd be interested. And thank you so much, Ben, for coming on.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
And Ben, when you had to go back and redo all of that, we had done a number of episodes, hadn't we?
I think we've done 8 or 10 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, we had done a lot, but it was just his Connery was so good that it just, the lawyers got nervous, I think. So we had to come back and do it all over again. I did, but Ben did.
Yeah.
I know Sean Connery's got some serious image rights to his likeness and whatnot, and the lawyers are quite severe.
Yeah.
Oh, are they? Is that right?
Yeah. They can't release anything. There was a Highlander board game released relatively recently, with lots of photos of characters from the movies and things like that. And they couldn't use Sean at all. They used some guy with a man bun. He was about 20 years old. I'm not entirely sure what the idea was behind that, but yeah, you can't use his image at all. So yeah, it's interesting. So I guess that sort of filtered all the way down to voice as well.
I have one Sean Connery story. It's not related to Highlander, but
I'll take it.
Oh yeah.
I was doing a production of King Lear in New York at Lincoln Center. Christopher Plummer was playing King Lear, and every night there was some celebrity or other come back and see Chris after the show. And one night Chris was particularly kind of jumpy before the show, and we found out that Sean Connery was there to see it. And so Chris had everything organized backstage, had drinks everywhere, and was all excited. He was like a little boy. And Sean Connery didn't turn up. And we thought, and Chris was heartbroken. But it turned out that this hadn't happened to anybody else in the lobby. He was absolutely mobbed. Like, 80-year-old women's Sean Connery, like jumping on him. And he couldn't get backstage. He had to jump in a car and drive away.
Oh no! But he did go and see the play at least.
He saw the play, but he was literally mobbed, and it wasn't like there weren't celebrities there every single night seeing things, but he was the only one. They jumped him.
Well, Sean Connery.
Fight to get out of the theater.
I think I'd lose my mind if I spotted Sean Connery around.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think I'd lose my mind if I spotted Sean Connery in the streets.
Yeah. So we spoke a little bit to Mick about how he got into this particular job of doing Highlander. How was it for you? Was it just like any sort of regular job? I guess they just reached out to you to see if you're available.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't know if Mick can remember the name of the producer, but I think I had done a couple of things with him before. I can't remember if Donkey Kong
Jesse was the
Highlander. Or, pardon me?
I remember Jesse was the director.
Yeah, Jesse Thompson was the director. Yeah.
And I remember
he
Bob
had beard.
was the engineer.
Bob, yeah.
And I don't remember the producer.
Did he have a beard? A kind of goatee and sort of long hair? Or this was another, I might be thinking of a different show.
I don't know. I remember, I know that, because it was a co-production, all the animation was done in France, in Paris.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And Nelvana was we were just really doing the voices, I think, through Nelvana. So I don't know who would have been there in the booth other than the voice director. It's possible that a producer was in the room, but they might not have been there. I remember Jesse and Bob very well. And I worked with Bob.
They were at the front desk, right?
Yeah,
they were in the front. All the
there was
producers.
somebody there who I was signing my contract for. I don't remember. Yeah. I was telling him about Studio 306 and how it's this great space where lots of music, lots of bands come in and have recorded albums there. And I think Drake's recorded an album there. And it was a real great home for us for a long time doing that show.
Yeah, I did about 4 or 5 shows in at Studio 306.
Yeah, I did another couple there as well. And as far as I know, it's still going strong. So, and Bob was still there.
Every once in a while, I'm in that neighborhood. I mean to deke up the alley and see if it's still there, but I haven't done it yet.
It was sort of hidden. It's really the studio. It's not off of the main street. In order to access it, you have to go up this alleyway and then kind of tuck in. So it's not easy to find, and there was no parking anywhere, I remember. So it was tricky. You'd have to kind of squeeze your cars into the back of this alley in order to get in. But I really have very fond memories of being in that space. They had like trees in there growing. It was very cool. I liked it.
Yeah, it was a good spot.
Oh,
How do you guys feel about being immortalized in plastic?
Oh yeah.
I don't have the action figure. I have a couple of great souvenirs. Like I have my unopened VHS.
Oh,
Nice.
Unopened VHS of Highlander in the Valley of the Thorn Pods.
Oh my God.
wow.
I have this amazing video game that I've never, which is your background,
The video
that
game.
is awesome.
which I've
Oh,
never
I love that
played, of
game.
course, but I did find that at a store one time. And then I was at a comic book store in New York City about 10 years ago, and I got the whole 4-disc DVD set, which was very
Oh my God.
That's
I
the
know.
one I've got sitting there. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've actually shown to my kids, and they were pretty impressed. Yeah. And then
Oh, that's awesome.
I have this old VHS of the animated movie as well, but I don't have the action figure. I need to find the action figure somewhere.
Oh yeah, no, you do absolutely. And you
That
can get this as well. This is the.
My God, it lights up. That's
It
great.
does. I was amazed it worked. We picked this up in LA, like, well, I don't know, was it 3 years ago now?
Yeah, 27.
At a Highlander event there, and I just saw it there, and I was just like, oh, I have to have that. But I didn't expect it to work, but it still works.
Not many people get to live out their life in plastic,
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Kind of the goal of every actor, as far as I know, is just to be
Yeah, an
immortalized.
action figure.
I mean, if you can't be immortalized as an action figure, why are we doing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is kind of a question for both you guys. Were you at all surprised that they were making a cartoon which ostensibly is considered kids fare about a franchise where guys run around decapitating each other?
Do you want to answer that, Nick?
I never thought of it. Now that I write and produce kids entertainment, right? So I don't think of Highlander, the animated series, as kids fare as much as I think of it as sort of like a boys action cartoon, right? Or what would have been called back then a boys action cartoon. So, and really the fans of those genres, yeah, sure, some of them are 12-year-old kids, but there's a lot of older fans of those types of cartoons, and I continuously watch all those shows today. And Netflix has like the new Voltron, things like that, where it's definitely part of that audience is the kids audience, and if you have to put it in a bucket, it would go in that kids bucket, especially because it's animation, and at the time there was no real adult animation other than the Flintstones, really. So but I don't really think of it that way. I think it was cross demographic show, and certainly that was their goal by tapping into an IP like the Highlander, which was definitely an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, after rewatching it recently for this video and stuff, a lot of the episodes, especially the earlier ones, had a lot of adult themes, mental health issues. There was some violence. There was a lot of things there that actually didn't. You think, oh, you wouldn't get away with that now.
Oh, sure.
Really?
I remember, the whole origin story of, Quentin's whole tribe being wiped out, and his parents, mother, I remember getting, killed in front of him. And it's like that, you can't do that stuff in quote unquote children's television, but you can do it in animation. And it didn't surprise me. I thought, I had seen that movie with my dad. He used to take me to anything that was like sci-fi or fantasy or anything we would go see. And we, in retrospect, we saw a lot of kind of mature movies. Like he took me to go see, Blade Runner, things like that. And so, and I was a kid, but I guess because it was fantasy, because it was sci-fi, it had there's an imaginative element to it that kind of makes it feel a little bit less, disturbing for children.
No, absolutely. That makes total
The
sense.
Highlander takes it to a whole new level with the beheading, right? Like it's
Well, it was a lovely way that they approached it, I think, in the idea of passing on knowledge and finding a way of doing that without, you know, cutting off their heads. That's one of the aspects I've always loved about it. And I really like, this is something that I brought up with the guys previously as well, that I felt like there were a lot of, it was almost ahead of its time. I thought there were a lot of parallels with Avatar Last Airbender in terms of, you know, this kind of key character going around gaining knowledge from, you know, needing to learn how to do certain things to fight the, you know, the ultimate evil, even though Quentin kind of did that every other episode anyway.
I think that's one of those, you know, having the sort of the young hero who's, you know, has to gain knowledge. It's an archetype that, you know, we're all familiar with, and that's why it speaks so well to young audiences too, is because, you know, that's the position you're in when you're 12 years old. You know, you're the hero of your own story, but you know nothing. So you got to go and get all of that experience. And then having a wise mentor like Ramirez or Obi-Wan or whoever it's going to be there to help guide you. And then also, you know, when you want to raise the stakes, you just remove that mentor away, and then the kids on their own. We've seen that lots of times, but it's really speaks to the audience in a great way.
Yeah.
I don't know, like I never really, because I don't think Highlander was ever on in Canada. Was it, Ben? Was it ever on here?
I don't think it was. No, I don't remember seeing it. Like, it wasn't on any of the main networks anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Was it a popular show at the time?
I mean, I found it by accident.
Yeah.
That answers that question.
In the mid-90s, we didn't have much in the way of social media. Nobody was communicating these things all the time. So I was just flicking through a TV guide once, and it said Highlander was on at 9 a.m. in the morning or something. I was like, why is a show about beheading people on in the morning? And it was an animated thing, and I was like, where did this come from? How did we not know? It's just...
Yeah, I think generally in the UK we suffered for, you know, in terms of even getting the live action series. I think was very difficult to see here. So I think it was probably a lot easier to find in the US. I don't know, Joe, did you find
Well, it was still difficult. Like I remember, it seems like I remember the station that was playing it at the time I was in Portland, Oregon, which I am now. But it, for some reason, they played it at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And that was like when they played the series. So it was like they played the animated series while there were breaks for the live action series. And then I think they only played like, it may have been the first season, and that was it. It was weird. So yeah. It was equally difficult to find.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, we knew it was a known brand, but it never really kind of, you know, rose above the surface. And then I started seeing, you know, I'd go into comic book shops because I'm a big comic book reader and all of that, and I would see memorabilia from the show, and I was completely taken aback. I was like, I thought this show kind of disappeared. But that's the great thing about, I think, Highlander fans, is that there's this appetite for everything Highlander, right? So you can, if there was an animated series, then let's check it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something that I've always been very adamant about, is making sure that people know about it. Because even now, people sort of, you know, aren't aware of it, or certainly haven't seen it.
What was the big draw for all of you who are, you know, doing this interview? I mean, what was the big draw for you?
In Highlander in general, do you mean? Or
Highlander, yeah.
Yeah. I think for me it was the first movie, and seeing that as a creative personally, I mean, even then I was very young. I was still at school, but it was the visuals that got me first, I think, and the imagination of having something take place in the past and the present, and the fact that you're using swords in the present, this kind of meld of past and future, and it was something I'd never seen before, and it just looked beautiful. You know, all of this, you know, the cinematography and the direction, so inventive and so original. It was, yeah, I think that was what pulled me in the first instance. And, you know, it's difficult to put my finger on sort of what really cemented that. But just for whatever reason over time, you know, stuck with it and just became so entrenched in loving it. And you know, so yeah, when you get to something like the animated series, I would sit and record it and watch it. I'm not saying that I loved every episode. I think that, you know, there was some issues with just the fact that, you know, he'd go to Magondor almost every other week, and it's just like, well, are you traveling the world to find immortals, or are you just sort of within a sort of a 2-mile radius, and every now and then you just come back again, you know, and things like that. So there were things that I found frustrating about it, but at the same time, you know, it was Highlander. It was more Highlander, and it was for all intents and purposes, we have Ramirez. I mean, you know, he might have had a different name. But you know, it was effectively the same character. So that was it for me. How about you guys? I'll let you guys chat now.
I mean, first and foremost, I'm Scottish, so, you know, a Scottish character on the big screen, and, you know, a Scottish hero was like, yes, I'm into it. And being a fan of like Errol Flynn movies and Musketeer movies and sword fights and stuff like that, and you've got all of that plus Sean Connery, and you've got the Queen music and stuff like that, it's hard to resist.
Mm.
It's just like a cake you've made of your own making, and you're just going to gorge on it.
No, I mean, I agree with Grant and Rob. It was definitely the first movie, and I think it would always be a favorite movie. Just the way it was put together. It was a perfect mix of everything, you know, romance, action, adventure, the craziness of these guys fighting with swords in like modern day New York City in the back alleys, and you know, the music, and it was a well put together movie. I think what cemented it for me was that there was more. I mean, there were sequels, there was live action and animated series. It was just a kind of a lore and a universe that was built upon and expanded, and that really intrigued me, and that probably cemented it being like a long-term thing that I was obsessed with and started digging into. Like I said, if they had just done the first movie, I'm absolutely certain it would still be a favorite movie. It'd be like, oh yeah, I'll watch Highlander. But you know, the fact that there's still, you know, things whispered being happening today, and it continued for so many years, definitely hooked me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to follow that. So yeah.
How about you, Ben? Were you aware of it before you?
I was aware of it, but I wasn't. I guess I was more of a sort of arty film person than into the sort of science fiction sort of stuff. So I mean, I hope it's not too disappointing. I did. That's
No.
Oh,
you know, it was just, for me, it was just another job really, and another way to help get my kids through school. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I had a great time doing it, and it was a bit of a, I think probably from Jesse, who was the voice director, it did become and Bob, it became a very sort of family feeling. And it was interesting that Mick and I got to record together all the time, because most of the time those things are done, you go, you know, you turn up a studio, you do your thing, and you're gone. And we recorded a lot together. I guess there were times we did solos, didn't we?
There were a few times, and I was mentioning that I stepped away for one summer, and I ended up recording my parts in France.
That's right. Oh, that's right.
So, because I was taking a French class, I was learning French there. So I went in and did a number of episodes there. But for the most part, yeah, it was great that we were able to be in the room together. And for me, it was particularly valuable because that was my first cartoon that I had ever really done. And it was very, you know, it was a very, very different experience. And I remember doing God, like 14 takes of the word no one time. I couldn't get it, and it stuck with. I mean, there's a lot. I think because it was my first series, a lot of moments sort of stuck with me, and yeah, that was one of them. But certainly being in the room together, I haven't done that. I mean, sometimes you're in there with one or two other people or one other person, but in the last show that I did, where I was a lead character, other than the first episode of each season where they would bring us back in together, it was always me by myself, and I'm just imagining what everybody else was doing. And so it's a lot more fun when there's somebody else. You have to wait for your lines, but other than that, it's a lot more fun when there's somebody else in the room with you.
Yeah, I bet. So I guess in some ways, Ben was almost like was he ever kind of like a real life mentor character for you, being, you know?
Well, I certainly learned a lot. Absolutely. Like I had never been in I'd never done a voice recording before. I'd never done it. So watching Ben, seeing how he does it, just like how he used the mic, how he used his body, I remember basically realizing that you don't just have to stand here like this. You can just act the way you would normally act. And especially in an action show, we were doing so much fighting. So there was a lot of, and all of those sounds you have to make, right? So all of the punches and we're throwing punches and we're doing all of this physical stuff. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh, we can do that? That's great. I didn't know. Yeah, and then seeing Ben play, you played more than one voice on the show too, right? Like there were.
Yeah, I did other things. Yeah.
So seeing the versatility, because I didn't have that. I would play like Quentin and then Teen Boy 1 and Teen Boy 2, and that would be. So seeing that versatility was kind of an eye opener for me too.
Awesome. One of the really interesting things we found out when researching this, actually from one of the guys at the production studio, Davis Panzer, who kind of had the creative rights to Highlander, was that there is a script for an animated movie that we had no clue even existed. But more curious still is that it's Quentin and Clyde and Ramirez, but the Ramirez is Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez. So it's Sean Connery's character from the movie. It isn't Don Vincente, which is what you played. So I'm curious to whether, and I could be completely wrong here, Ben, that whether you say you had to re-record your lines because you were too close to Sean Connery. I wonder, was he always Don Vincente, or was he ever the original character, and maybe they changed the name as well for the same sort of reasons they changed your voice?
I'd just be making something up if
it was a stretch, but I thought I'd ask.
I can't really remember though I do remember rumblings before we had to re-record stuff that they were very touchy about the whole Sean Connery thing. Yeah. And I think we even, I don't know if you can remember this or not, Mick, but there was a kind of, every once in a while we would have to go back on something because it was too, not that I was too close to it or that I'm some great mimic or something, but that it just was too close to the film or something. So they would go and they would re-record it, rewrite it or something like that. So it very well may have been that they changed the name right off the top, knowing that everybody's ears would perk up if they heard the same name.
Yeah.
I remember in the scripts it always just said Ramirez. It never said anything but Ramirez in the script. So maybe they just did that on purpose because they wanted to leave it open to the interpretation.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
It was also a guy who did a lot of animation around the place at the time, who was known for his amazing Sean Connery that he could do. Yeah. And so everyone who in my position was going into the audition, when we saw him, we just thought, well, forget that. None of us are going to get it because he'll land it. And I was quite surprised that they said I sounded like Sean Connery, because I did sort of hear tapes and I thought, it sounded like Sean Connery to me. But it was a cool show to do. It was a lot of fun. And how old were you, Mick? Were you like 15, 16 years old?
Yeah, I was 15, 16 years old, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you had quite puffy hair then.
I had quite puffy.
Yeah. Like I've got now.
I remember when I showed up at the airport in Paris to be picked up for the voice record. They had a sign that just said Miklos Perlis, and I just went, "Hi, it's me," and they were shocked because they didn't think it was played by, the voice was of an actual teenage kid. They thought some amazing actor was doing the voice, and they told me later, they're like, "We pictured you as like some 45-year-old guy who was." Why would you do that? Like when really there was no. I mean, there was acting going on, but it was really, I was just doing my own voice. Like I was not putting on anything at the time. So, but yeah, I was young. And what was great is it really started a long career in voice acting for me. Like up until I became a producer, I was still doing cartoons and loving it. And now I'm directing and I'm in the booth. I'm producing those kinds of shows. So, yeah, it was really laying the foundation at that time when you're 15 years old of what ended up becoming a career.
And do you live in Toronto?
Just north of Toronto.
Just north?
And how has it been for you after how has your career sort of progressed and stuff been since then?
Oh, well, I was mainly a theater actor then, and I stayed a theater actor. I can't remember where we are in time. When Highlander was made, but I did a big long stint at a well-known festival here in Canada called the Stratford Festival, which is sort of dedicated to, well, it's not dedicated to the works of William Shakespeare, but that's how it started as. That's the festival it started as. And then from there, I moved down to a place called Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is sort of on the other side of Lake Ontario from Toronto. Where I was at the Shaw Festival for 15 years. And I left there in 2017, that was my last year there, I think. And since then, I've just been doing the normal freelance thing of television, voice work, theater, and trying to sort of, I wouldn't say I'm trying to back out of the business, but it's sort of, it doesn't have the same thrill that it once had. I mean, every once in a while you do a show that you think, yeah, there's that feeling again. But I'm certainly more a theater animal than I am a media animal. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I was telling the guys that one of the great privileges for me, without even realizing it at that time, is watching all of these actors come in to do their episodic guest spot as the immortal of the week or whatever it was, and so many of them came from Stratford or came from Shaw Festival or even came from doing lots of TV and film in Toronto. And it's great that in Canada we get to cross kind of bridges like that and get to do all kinds of different sorts of things, where it doesn't always work like that in places where there's a bigger population of actors and they really sort of get pigeonholed in their various genres.
Yeah, and certainly I think in Canada at the time we were making Highlander, I would say the majority of actors, their base place was the theater, unless they were on a television series. But most of the people who were on television series came out of the theater, and that has changed quite a lot now. I would say the majority of people who are going into the business are going in because of television and expand out into the voice world when there's not enough work going around. They expand into the voice world, and I think every single one of them who does it recognizes what a blast it is to do. I mean, it's really, really fun work. And again, to go back to what Meek and I experienced, it is really good fun if you're doing it with someone, because it also moves at a tremendously crazy pace if you're doing it by yourself. Yeah. And it can be very, very pressured. And for some people and depending on the voice director sometimes can be a little abusive, isn't the right word, but it's a very demanding pace. And the thing that's wonderful when you're playing with someone is that you have that moment to just listen to what the temperature of the scene is that you then join in on, as opposed to, imagining what it is and then them having to try and guide you to this place that's going to match up with the person they recorded yesterday.
Yeah.
Again, that was very helpful for me because, I don't know how I would have done it if I had been in the room alone, but I know it wouldn't have had all of the dimensions that it has, whatever is there, because, I had people in the room with me who had experience and knew how to craft a scene and a tone. I probably would have just yelled every line. And, because, they wanted to make sure. I think at that point, I didn't understand the difference between energy and volume. So I would have just been really loud and really fast all day long. But being in there with like these really great actors, I couldn't help but just absorb some of that.
Mm. So, and Mick's doing himself a bit of disservice here too. I mean, he was, when he was a young man, and it's very apparent still now, he was a very, very bright guy. And very, very quick to pick things up that without other actors being there, he was very quick at picking up what the director was asking for. And whereas a lot of people of his age were sort of trapped in the thing they could do and couldn't move outside that little parameters, where he was very, very quick to sort of, dive into places that, when you're 15 or 16, it's difficult to sort of play stuff way out there. You get it can be a little intimidating, and he would jump in with both feet, it made it fun for the people who were playing with him. And it also lent a great atmosphere to the room that he was a very, very intelligent young guy. Yeah. So it wasn't like going in. Sometimes I recorded a lot of stuff with very young kids, and it was a tiring day, because they can't focus for a long time. And so it wasn't like that with Mick at all. He was really, really great.
Oh, well, look, it's been fantastic having you both on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been great. I'm so glad that I could reunite you again. It's
it was a real treat. It was really
it has been a real treat. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. So I don't know if either of you recall, I sent a little thing.
Yes, I've got it here. Ready to go.
Now, I don't know how this is going to work with two of you.
Hi, this is Benedict Campbell.
And this is Mick Perlis. And we're on Highlander Heart. Inviting you to
hold fast
and don't
lose your head.
What we should have done was ended the episode like every cartoon,
yes,
and laugh. Yeah, let's do that. Oh, dude.
Yes,
Yeah,
fast.
Right. Go on then.
You're weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.